Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines, Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
Yeah, it's been a long time, Jackie.
Yeah, sure. Uh, Time flies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, so today we I was reading this book here were a couple. This is restated in them, but they had a couple statements. One is how and also why. Do you create an expert system rather than hire expert employees? And then the second one, which is kind of related to it, is businesses should be system dependent, not people dependent
yeah,
overall.
yeah,
Um, so the very first one, creating expert system rather than expert employees, part of that is because in the book they argued, look, you have your choices, right? You can either hire people that are more talented. They take, of course, longer to learn, the overall structure of everything. And once they do, they can field almost any type of question because they have internal knowledge, and they're a quote unquote an expert. Of course, that means you pay them more versus you can create systems, very, very clear systems and logic and everything, and actually even give them like an aided type of, if this happens, then do that, right? And that's where, if you have those put in place, you don't have to hire very expensive people, right? You can really lower your cost per person because they're relying on the system, not you're not relying on someone's judgment, especially because this is where it gets into with like branding and consistency, right? If people start doing things on their own, they do them very differently. It's amazing, actually.
yeah. And the thing that I was just thinking about, because I saw the sentence just a few moments ago, is that it is, of course, mostly seen from the business point of view. That if you want to have a successful business, or if a business wants to be less people dependent, this makes a lot of sense. Where, of course, as an employee, depending on which side of the table you're on, um, expert systems will mean that you have lower bar of entry. But yeah, it also means that the company has less. You have less leverage, might be a way of putting it.
Yeah.
Um, so stuff like this really does depend on how people feel. I do tend to lean towards the things that are on screen here. That uh, working for a company, this is what I should be working for. I'm not really supposed to make myself invaluable in that aspect.
No.
Even though of course, it's nice to be, but if I'm really truly working for the company,
Yeah.
um, this should be what you strive to do. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think it's a very good point. And I think you could get into the discussion how people in general, they're hesitant sometimes to document everything because they're threatened, right? They're very threatened that they're going to lose their job,
Hmm.
or it might be automated, which kind of gets into where Jackie and we had decided this is a good topic because I think roughly one of our earlier I'd have to go look at it, conversations on RPA, robotics process automation, talked about on the far left there's like the assisted RPA. It's very clear data structure, very clear patterns and logic. And on the far right was the unassisted, the AI type level of stuff where you have really it's amazing software that it's programmatically figuring out. You need tons of data, but the data is not clear, the logic isn't clear, so it derives it from looking at all the data. And by having expert systems, that is kind of having the data that's very clear and logic driven. If this, you do this. If that, you do that. And that lends itself very well to automation, to RPA.
Yeah, and to something that's even for humans will make it easier to pull out the data you want to do, the KPIs you want to have, all that different types of stuff is great when you have an expert system in place that really does tell you which kind of data you have and what is where and all of that. And it is something that a company should somehow strive towards, having an expert system, because it's to me it's lower hanging fruit than expecting AI to come and swoop it all up for you and be able to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
It's simpler to just make sure that what your employees are currently doing is systemized. Yeah.
Yeah. And once you start, and of course my background is in data science, right? So this is a lot of like what I do. Once you start quantifying it and seeing the structure, the insights you can get out of it are amazing. And you start understanding kind of almost causation type things. Why by doing this way, and actually testing things and doing experiments to understand if there are better ways. So when the computer's figuring it all out, you can kind of still get some degree, but it's never as clear, right? It's the amount of data they throw into it and how to control for all the stuff. They'll say it is, but honestly, like I said, I did a lot. It's not as clear as a structured experiment where you build things and test the actual metrics on it, and isolate things.
Yeah, and to me, in general, just the idea. I currently have a similar issue with what I do at work, and it's much more soft than this. It's much more broad, but the general idea is that the system that I'm kind of responsible for has the need for human input, and there are a lot of levels to it. How much data does the system need to have to give it meaningful input?
Mm-hmm.
But if you just cut it all into what does we need, or what do we need from the human, we for the most part we only need to know how long they used. Now, the rest is not fluff, but it's nice to have.
Yeah.
The only real thing that we need to know is how long did you use on this given task.
Yeah.
And as soon as we have that, all of the prior things that you have selected or that you have decided or that you have determined will, by knowing that one thing, the human input, how long did it actually take you to do, we can derive so much more than what we already have, because we have all of the other pieces all around, but what we need is to actually know when it then leaves this system over here, comes into the human hand, how long does it then take the human to finish whatever it is?
Which I think is, I think it's slightly off. It's highly related. Don't get me wrong, Jackie. It's slightly off of what this statement is saying, but you're absolutely spot on right. Without having metrics on your system, having a system doesn't really help that much, right? Having those metrics gives you such amazing insights as to what actually is working and what isn't, the flow, all the stuff. Because otherwise you're guessing and you're hoping, but by having the actual little bit of metrics, like, really goes a long ways.
Yeah, and the thing I'm of course going for here is that businesses should be system dependent, not people dependent, whereas that is the exact opposite of what we are currently. We're totally people dependent.
Right.
What needs to be done is in the heads of someone. Who needs to do it is in the heads of someone else. How long it takes is in the head of someone third. And the issue is that this business has decided a system to put it in, but actually getting these people to put it in there, that is what I'm kind of getting at, is the issue that I'm currently struggling with. Is that we have the system,
yes,
the business wants to get the stuff in the system, but humans are reluctant to put it in that given system. And I'm not saying it's because either one of these things, but it's a mix of it all that's kind of keeping them from actually putting the stuff in the system. And it is this thing with them probably being afraid of becoming redundant, or someone being able to actually measure there some kind of inefficiency somewhere, whatever, stuff like that. Yeah.
And I'm glad you clarified that, because I think you're spot on. I was going to mention something, and before I thought it was related, it wasn't, because now I understand where you went with this. But I did, when you were talking earlier, I thought you had a different angle on it that's relevant. So years ago, I was doing a project for, it's like a VoIP company. This is like 15 years ago. And they were new, VoIP was a relatively new thing. It wasn't a standard thing. And they would automate taking a landline and switching it to VoIP for you and do all this other sophisticated stuff and save you money. And so they wanted some help creating a model to show businesses how much money they can save. And so I started looking at their data, and I realized, like, it really depended on these two questions and how they do those two questions. None of the other stuff mattered at all, right? Yet they wanted this really complex stuff, and I'm like, all that other stuff doesn't make a bit of difference. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You're overcomplicating it. Even though my model predicted perfectly fine with what I gave them, they were disappointed because they wanted this really, I must say, convoluted, where I'm putting in my emotions, right? But I'm like, they wanted this complex thing, and of course, people probably wouldn't have even used it because it would have been too complex. But yeah,
and that one of the things that we currently get with the system that we have is that it's too complex, it's too time consuming, it's I even heard unstable. That doesn't really make sense. But the thing is that someone higher up decided that the business should be system dependent, not people dependent. So the decision was good, and we've also figured out how to create an expert system rather than keep hiring expert employees.
Yeah.
The problem is actually filling out the system with the current expert employees' knowledge, so that it actually can fit the role that this is supposed to do. And that's where we kind of hit what I got to at the beginning. One thing is what the company wants, what the business should do, how to create an expert system rather than hire expert employees, or businesses should be system dependent. I do believe that a lot of businesses try to get there. The issue is with how to get there, or how to get the knowledge from the people, right? Yeah. And that's probably one of the hardest parts, where I remember in another podcast you talked about McDonald's and how they set up a production line kind of environment, and that makes a lot of sense, and you can hire people into it. But back in the day, there must have been at one point where someone was at the grill and someone was at the letters or whatever, and then at some point someone said, you know what, you stay here at the checkout window,
right?
And you right? And so yeah,
it's actually I think that the movie is called it's a wonderful movie, actually documenting Ray Kroc, who was he bought McDonald's from the brothers. But it has like a 5-minute clip talking about how the McDonald's brothers designed. They said, screw it, we're gonna get rid of 85% of our menu, or maybe it was even bigger, right? They kept 3 things. They kept milkshakes, hamburgers, and French fries, and that was it. And then, to your point, they actually went in, they designed their kitchen, and they went into a tennis court and drew it with chalk on the ground and laid it out. And they did it like 3 times to see this nice, I think they called like almost orchestrated, like, this beautiful, where everyone just got stuff done really quickly. And they went from an average turnaround time, I'm going to make it up, but it was like 30 minutes to get your food, down to 30 seconds or something. I mean, like, it was under 3 minutes. I remember that. It was a very it was insane. Totally revolutionized, honestly, the world at the time, right? Because no one did this. They got rid of all the silverware. Everything was paper before they had like real cups and things. And then they had to get out of their car, which was, everyone at the time had I forget what they're called, but the people would ride out usually on roller skates or walk out to them at the car hop and put the thing in the window, right? And they totally redesigned everything. And at first it was a total, they actually had some bad luck and things flopped drastically.
Yeah. Yeah.
But by like the second day, they started getting some business, and then it just got busier and busier. It was a wonderful story.
Yeah, it to me, to this day, it's still one of the most convenient ways of doing anything is to go through a drive-through.
Yeah.
It's just up to one window, give your order, next window, do the payments, next window, get the food. It's just, there's almost nothing else I know that is as convenient as that.
Yeah.
It should be getting it delivered to the door, but yeah.
The Founder was the movie. That few minutes, and it was a great movie, but that few minutes, it was watching these guys kind of just have an idea, and again, they created this system, and just really revolutionized how all of, food was distributed and made and everything. But yeah, having a system, right, is it. Yeah. That's the thing. And I actually, Jackie, I wanted to bring that back. I think that was a really good point. When you're starting a new business, it's much easier to create systems because you don't have the insecurity of your employees, right, or whatever you want to call it, and there's not even this like the knowledge. But I think if you start out even with your employees and say, this is our goal, we want to do this stuff, help us figure out what makes the most sense. So when new people come on, it's very clear and we're helping them. It's much easier than coming in after years and saying, now we're going to do this. And boy, I'm sure people really fight it.
Yeah. And of course it's a personal situation or whatever you call that. It's something that I do each day. But one of the suggestions that I and some of the other people I worked with was, let's at least agree upon everybody new will get their task through the system, and not even that actually has caught on yet, but people new to the company will accept the company's current state, so to speak. And I had another colleague tell me that it's weird. Our company is a weird setup. It's not really a private company because it's publicly owned, might be a good way of putting it. But it's actually still it's still something that if you had enough money, you could buy it if they wanted to sell it. It's not really state owned, but it is still kind of, and it was at one point. Weird stuff aside, the thing is that people kind of slow down when they come in from the private sector, which is sad because the company has a good brand and all that stuff, so people will come to us. But when they've been there for an amount of time, they kind of set their expectations lower. Their productivity seems to not halt, but at least change. And it's sad when we have the opportunity of just keeping them at that pace as when they came. But yeah,
I'm a big fan. I don't know if you ever heard of him, and I'm blanking on his name. I got a couple dozen books from him. Thomas Sowell. He grew up in the South, partially in the South in the U.S., and then moved to Brooklyn. And he's probably like 80 something now. So this is quite a long time ago. And when he was going to school, they had, I forget what they called them, but they had A class students and B class students. And what they realized at the time was, if you leave everybody in the same classroom, all of your top achievers and all your bottom achievers, it doesn't bring the bottom achievers up. It just lowers the top achievers down. And so what they said was, we're going to divide up and we're going to put the good kids in their own classroom and the bad kids in the classroom. And sure enough, the good kids actually really kicked butt, right? they did far better, and the bad kids just stayed where they were, right? And so in some ways, some kids got a better deal, and other ones just stayed where they are. So no one really, quote unquote, lost. And I think it has to do with what you just described, right? When you're around other people that aren't working as hard, or you're not getting rewarded or whatever, the commonality isn't to keep going at it; it's to fall back, right, and do less.
Yeah, and again, I don't have the real insight into how much people are doing and not doing, and getting done and not getting done, and all that. But it's almost a feeling or a hunch or whatever you would call something like that, where you'll slowly begin to see it being expressed in some way, where this system, which is a work order system, the idea of someone defining the tasks that needs to be done on a given system. If you just define definitively, these are the tasks that I, as a boss or a leader, wish to have done with this interval, and it should take, let's say, 10 hours a week. As soon as you've defined that and people do it and register they're doing it, you can measure if people are doing it. Where currently,
absolutely,
it's just right up in the air. Please make sure to get it done. Right. But nobody is really saying how long it should take, and nobody is really saying how long it took.
Right.
And
how do you fix anything if you don't know? Right?
Yeah.
How do you change? It's just impossible.
So, it's me being a bit frustrated on actually having an expert system, and the business wanting an expert system, but not really being able to execute the expert system. Yeah.
Well, and you know, from me talking to it, maybe some people here haven't heard it, but when I was at TI, I finally just quit, and it was because I finally realized I watched a short video on being depressed, and it wasn't that I thought I was depressed, but he was talking about how people are over medicated, this and that, and then he said, well, what happens when people aren't depressed? Like, how do they typically come out of depression? And it talked about people working on new things, getting excited about their, what they're focused on, doing fun stuff they like. And when I watched that video, I literally was like, it dawned on me that I had finally at TI gotten beaten down so much that I no longer tried to do like cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? I was just like, yeah, whatever. I'll just do my job, and I don't care. And I realized it was, I'm going to say killing me. Maybe that's a bit extreme, but I'm like, I have to get out of this place. I still waited like 4 months so I could get my annual bonus, because I'm not crazy. But
no, fair enough.
But it was one of those things of, it was hard for me. It's one of those things, I forget what it's called, not slippery slope, but it's incremental movements. It wasn't overnight that it happened. It slowly crept in and slowly discouraged me over time to try new stuff. And I got to say, I'm usually a highly motivated, want to excel and do stuff. And I got to the point where I did the minimum possible. It was. And I realized I was the one losing out. The company was too, but it hurt me, I think, more than the company.
Yeah, and that's the issue, right? I'm not in a place where I'm thinking, I need to leave or anything, but I'm still like, how many more years? Now I've been there for 3 years, and I do get stuff done, and I do get recommendations, and I do get appreciation and all that stuff. But the biggest, the red line, the thing that really is what I'm supposed to do is also the hardest thing to move. And each time I get asked, what's the status of this? How's the implementation of this going? And me almost having nothing to show for it, because I've moved the IT stuff over here, and I've made this over here easier. We've implemented something there, and someone bought a new module to it over here. Everything is moving, The only thing that's not really moving is the adoption rate. And that's not because of the employee on the floor. It's because of some middle, because the higher up keep asking, why are you not using it more? And the people on the floor are like, shouldn't I be using this more? And somewhere in the middle, and it's a big middle,
Yeah.
it's getting lost. There's some kind of deficiency or whatever you call that in the middle that's making it not really happen. And I've not found it yet. And I had two great colleagues work with me through the last 2 weeks trying to really figure this out. And we got through a lot of stuff. We had more meetings than usual, and we don't like to have too many meetings because it's better to get stuff done. But we still had a good amount of meetings, and we thought we had found the issue. Their measurability is missing. Leadership hasn't said, this is the goal. Please make sure you move towards this measurable goal.
Right.
So that we can say, now we're at 10%, now we're at 20%, whatever, something measurable. And then we presented it. I was talking for maybe half an hour, going through all of the points, and then they chimed in and stuff like that. And we used maybe 2 hours in all. And it ended up being management wasn't sure they wanted to measure it. It's like, what? Like, okay, so the thing we found to be really missing, and that's from every point of view we could find, they said they weren't sure they wanted to measure it. And like, okay, so then why are you asking for progress if you don't want to? No. Yeah, it's me ranting about the same thing, but yeah, it's sad that it's so hard at times to implement an expert system, even if it's what should be done.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the point is, you need especially when you're establishing one in a business that's already been around for quite a while, you got to have all your ducks in a row to get it to actually work, right? It's a lot harder to do it versus in a new company or a new thing. It's much easier to do it, or a smaller company, right? There's less red tape, less people involved, and less people fighting it, and you can just do it.
Yeah, we tried to shed some light on what we felt had gone wrong. Is the highest management, I think, from what I know, we have maybe 10 levels before we get to where I'm at. And the first 3 levels, pretty clear, written stuff, signatures on it, everything. Really, really, they want that.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense. Below that, more something they say they want. A bit lower than that, it's more like something you should know that we want. And lower than that, it's like someone above me wants it. So, and that, then it gets lost. If every step within it isn't clear, I want this, and what they said, I've better defined it so you can understand what I want, or else it's almost impossible for anybody to actually give you what. Yeah, it's hard to deliver on something that's not clear.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that was a good chat.
Yeah, sure. A lengthy one, but yeah.
Not too bad, but yeah. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, bye, Joe.